Hi, I'm not John Green, and today we'll be talking about literature and linguistics. Before we get into the growth of this video, we must understand that nothing in this world is endowed by a true and set meaning. There's no higher power, no essence or truths that make this apple an apple. Its essence and being don't compel us to understand what it is. Rather, there's many relationships and structures that help explain what it is and what it represents. So what is structuralism? Structuralism identifies structures, systems of relationships, which endow signs or items with identities and meanings. So that you don't get confused in our later segment about post-structuralism, please note that an underlying structure can be interpreted similarly across different backgrounds and cultural contexts, because every sign is rooted in material reality. And to clarify even more, we're not going to be looking at themes, ideas, or the actual meaning of the text, but rather what is creating this meaning, and how is it possible that we understand it.
Saussure's theory of language distinguishes between la langue, meaning language, and la parole, meaning word or any application of la langue in speech and writing. Paroles appear as phonetic and semantic signs and rely on the grammatical structures provided by the langue. Linguistic signs join a signifier or a sound associated to an image and its signification or its meaning, and only has meaning within its system or langue. Let's go to the thought bubble. According to this theory, the word tree is just a sound. However, if you put it in a sentence and describe it with other words, you can come to the eventual realization that the word tree refers to this concept. Essentially, the relationship of words and the concepts they refer to is completely arbitrary. You could describe tree with any sound, and as long as there's a sentence and understanding that connects tree to tree, it'll be true. That's why different languages exist. Not everyone calls this a tree. The sound tree is simply a part of the structure that is the English language.
Russian formalism expands on Saussure's theory, seeing individual works as the parole and the various recognizable and recurring functions of characters as the langue. Narratives and texts as a whole are dependent on a structure created by actants, or characters, that fulfill certain functions or roles as part of the story. Here's some functions you may recognize: hero, villain, donor, and many more. The relations of these characters thus comprise and contain the meaning of the whole work. In Saussure's terms, we can say that the work is a word, while the actants and their functions are a sentence. Like the word takes meaning from its role in a sentence and various other sentences, a work takes meaning from the actions and relationships of its characters.
We read text word by word in the horizontal sequence of different parts of each sentence. Saussure's syntagmatic approach explains how our instinctive way of reading from start to finish causes us to understand narratives in terms of its chronological sequence of events. This approach emphasizes surface structures of the text, as in sentences as they are originally said or written, rather than deep structures, as in the abstract structure of language that helps us determine semantics or meaning.
Language is a rather flexible thing. You can describe something in a multitude of ways. You can make the most familiar things unfamiliar by using different words and changing your syntax, and this is called defamiliarization and estrangement. Take something normal, like speaking to someone. Now think of it like this. Why is it that I can transfer data from my brain to someone else's by opening my mouth and pushing air with vibrations in their direction? It's like seeing things through how you perceive them rather than how they are known. You defamiliarize something to force a higher level of perception, because relying on preconceived definitions of the text can often blind someone from the text's true and objective meaning. Defamiliarization accesses these deep meanings by rearranging these linguistic structures and forcing the reader's perspective to go beyond the shallow syntagmatic approach. You can see these in narratives as the story, events in a normal chronological sequence, appears far less meaningful to the plot, the artful, subversive rearrangement of the sequence. As the author shapes the story with various twists and turns, the omission of certain information, and other devices, the reader discovers far more meaning in the text rather than seeing chronological events unfold.
Structuralists Roland
Barthes, Jacques Derrida,
Michael
Foucault, and Tsvetan Todorov
followed Saussure and argued that the text is a representation of the writer's mind and can be broken down into distinguishable parts. Histoire is a sequence of events from beginning to end. Discourse is a rearranging of those events for its own purpose. The message created by the text can only be read through codes, the code of puzzles, the symbolic code, and the cultural code.
These codes help the reader derive meaning from the text and familiarize themselves with the narrative. They're like lenses for the reader to use. If one uses the cultural code, they use knowledge outside of the text to understand the work, or if it's the symbolic code, they use the knowledge of symbols. These codes are often blended together, giving the reader a sense of the narrative without actually telling them how it goes.
Jonathan Cahier insisted that literature has no existence beyond literary conventions meant to help the reader identify a science system and context, making the text overall less strange and defamiliarized.
Like structuralism, deconstruction identifies textual features. But unlike structuralism, the unstable and arbitrary nature of language dismantles the meaning of the text. Going back to our wonderful tree. We initially said that the sound tree refers to this, and that through the structure of the English language, the meaning of tree is tree. But what if this isn't the only reality? What if this isn't the only meaning of tree? Post-structuralism says that language only ever refers to other language, that there is no absolute reality that ends this continuous stream of meaning. In structuralism, it ends with the sound tree meaning this, but in post-structuralism, the chain of signification continues. The sign tree symbolizes life, life embodies humanity, humanity exemplifies corruption, and then on. There is no fixed meaning. Everything can be reinterpreted. Botkin's narrative theory includes the idea of dialogics, in which the meaning of language is not found in its structure, but in the relationship between partners in dialogue, speaker and addressee. Dialogue is often polemic, a strong attack on someone or something, or humanistic, which promotes human connection and community. Meaning evolves from the interactions the author and reader have with the work, and the context it is set in.
In Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller criticizes American capitalism and meta-narratives such as the American Dream through dialogue rather than just characters' thoughts and actions alone. For example, in a heated conversation between Biff and Linda Lohman about Biff's father, Willie, Linda explains how Willie works for a company 36 years this March, opens up unheard of territories through their trademark, and now in his old age they take his salary away, in response to Biff's claim that he's got no character. The argument between these characters reflect the negative effects of American capitalism on the average working man and the falsity of the American dream. Despite a lifetime of hard work as a salesman, Willie Lohman never achieves the success that he longs for, and his failures manifest themselves in the family's interactions and spoken dialogue.